Would you believe there's a way to simplify all of the caretaking that you have to do in your life? Now, listen, I know you. I know that you have about a million irons in your fire at any given moment, and that most of that is obligations to the people that you love and care about the most. They are the people that you're serving either in your occupation, your career, in your families, in your communities. But you're a woman in midlife. Like, I know you, girl. You have a lot of people that rely on you, and it can get overwhelming, exhausting, even. And what if I told you that I could reduce that workload considerably with one thing that you do every single day? I know it sounds too good to be true, but I promise you, this podcast will not disappoint you. So keep listening.
I know your deep, dark secret. You don't like your life. You're a woman in midlife, and for the past 2 decades or more, you've poured yourself in to other people. You've poured yourself into your career, your family, and yet on the inside, you feel broken. And that's no way to be. I'm Dr. Natalie Marr. I'm a clinical psychologist and a life transition expert. It wasn't too long ago that I was in your shoes, waking up in my early 40s thinking I've got 2 failed marriages and I'm a single mom for the second time in my life. And I just knew that I could do better, that I could feel better. Fortunately for you, I have about 20 years experience clinically. And so I've created a method that will help you learn to love your story. I know that the story that you're telling yourself about your life feels awful. And I know that you think that you can't change that. I assure you, you can. And when we work together, I'm gonna help you to craft a different story, a story that you love, a story that makes you wanna get up every single day.
Welcome back. Oh, I'm so excited just to sit and visit a little bit more. I really did miss having you, my listener, be the one that is here talking with me on these podcasts every week. I really enjoyed the interviews, and oh my gosh, I learned so much from my Women Inspiring Women series this summer, but I was really missing you. So I'm so happy to get back here. And today's topic is one of my favorites. It definitely is something that I think that most women are very skeptical about when I start working with them, either in coaching or in any capacity, to be quite honest, that there's really kind of this one thing that I'm going to ask that you start doing every single day that really does start and simplify and make life so much easier, even when you have multiple irons in the fire at any given time. And even when you're the caretaker of all the folks in your life, this does actually really fix a ton of problems. But it isn't an overnight success either. This is a practice, which is why I say it's a thing that I'm going to ask that you're doing every single day. And you build up your capacity to use this superpower over the course of time, over the course of building the strength of the tool itself. So unlike last week's podcast, and if you haven't listened to last week's, you better go back and listen to that one. Unlike last week's podcast, this is not an accelerator in our change process, but this is a staple. It's just something that has to happen. And it's a subject matter that I come back to over and over. And today's podcast, I really want to, just unpack it a little bit and talk about the science of why it is that I suggest that women do this. Talk about, how simple and small it can be to incorporate this as a practice into your daily life, and how invaluable that it really becomes for us over time. Right? All right. I just wanted to take a minute and thank you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for making this podcast even a thing. It's being downloaded all over the world, which really amazes me, but it also warms my heart because I felt like this is the kind of information that women in their 40s and 50s and 60s need to start hearing. We need to get a fire lit under us, right? But we also need to know how to go in the right direction. And it's hard when you hit midlife and it feels like life is just not clicking. I want to help you have a centered life, to feel like you're thriving and that you love every minute of your life as it is right now. And I promise you, you really can do that. And I am so happy to have you here. So I just wanted you to hear that. Be sure that you're following me in wherever you get your podcasts so that you never miss when I drop a new one. And also like and comment. I do listen. If you've commented on these podcasts, you'll see that I start feeding you more information about those podcasts. So let's get started. What I'm talking about, this elusive skill set that I'm talking about, isn't so elusive. It's a practice, a mindfulness or meditation practice on a daily basis. Okay. So let's first discover, what am I talking about when I talk about mindfulness and meditation? Because, oh my gosh, it has been sweeping like the pop culture of self-care, which honestly, if somebody is doing any form of meditation or mindfulness and starting a practice like this and getting it to be part of their life, I don't care what entrance it decided to make for them to start to want to do it. I just want you to start to do it. So to me, doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that it's gotten that pop culture vibe. But that being said, when things get put through that lens, then I think we sometimes start to lose the quality of what it is that we're trying and help you have, as those of us that are service providers and clinicians and doctors and scientists, like we want to make sure that you're doing this with the intention behind it that it's meant to have. So without further ado, I like to start defining mindfulness first because it's the bigger, broader umbrella that we're going to be getting at. And then we'll talk about how meditation on a daily basis as a practice becomes such a powerful tool to be building that mindfulness in your life. So the other thing that I like to do when I'm operationally defining mindfulness is use its opposite, because I think that that's how our brains kind of work. We want to, okay, well, what is mindfulness? Okay, then let's look at what mindlessness is, because the mindless state is what we're kind of warding against. And the reason that this is such a powerful tool in women's lives and anybody's life is really to get us away from that mindlessness state, right? So let me talk about myself for a little bit, give you an example of my mindless state. Not too long ago, I had gone through a huge overhaul in my private practice as a licensed clinical psychologist, where I practice in Minnesota. And I had been working for a group practice for a very short period of time and kind of dabbled in, this is how this is going to look for me. What I had really not paid attention to is all of the very fine details that we're going to go into this great endeavor that I was going into, putting out my own shingle, doing my own thing, and how all of the underpinnings that go with that, right? So one of the things that I really do so well is numb myself by overworking. I've talked about this on the podcast before, so this is no surprise to anybody. And what I found during this overhaul of moving from, somebody was doing kind of the background work. So it's all of that administrative kind of thing where you're getting contracts with insurance companies and you're deciding which insurance companies and you're doing all of their paperwork. And of course, no one person's paperwork is the same as the other. So you're repeating things as you apply for contracts with different insurance companies. So there was that side. And then there was finding vendors for, things like my electronic health record or what equipment that I was going to use when I was using telehealth once I had to go into that whole venture. It's things of that nature, right? I had literally just paid no attention to, this is going to be a time consuming thing, right? I'm going to need a lot of time to be able to put into giving myself what I need to establish this business. And my overworking self likes to overwork in the things that she knows how to do well. This is not rocket science. This is a dopaminergic addiction. So it gives me a happy feeling when I'm working a lot and feel successful in my workingness. And so I wasn't like putting more time into finding new contracts and doing the admin side of things. I was finding more time to fit in extra clients and do more work on that side of things, which from a, financial perspective was okay, except that I hadn't put the things into place on the other side to be able to support that. So billing, insurances was not happening with the ease and the, quickness of getting payment that I wanted it to, because I hadn't put that time in on the admin side and I was just adding more clients on the other side. So my first year of business, I lost a lot of money, left a lot of money, I should say, on the table because I didn't have those things in place. And there are rules around when you can capture and get that reimbursement. And so I got taught and I got burned, but I got taught quick how I was going to need to compensate for that. Now, why am I telling you all of this when I want to talk about mindfulness? Well, here is the thing. I had a very limited awareness of my tendency to overwork as a numbing agent, right? Like I knew that I would overwork, but what I was really doing is I was overworking to use it kind of as an analgesic, as a painkiller to how much overwhelm I was having about the administrative side of things, right? That's essentially what was happening. So I knew I needed to get to these admin tasks. And in some ways I was subtly overworking, maybe not so subtly, maybe real not subtly overworking on the other side of things in order to kind of numb myself from how much overwhelm I was having on the side of the admin piece. So it took me some time in my own practice of meditation to get to this place where I have a better, what I call compassionate self-awareness of those old patterns of behavior that I learned and were honestly really productive in survival mechanisms at one point in my life. So it's not like overworking was such a horrible thing. I got a doctorate. I mean, there are some things that actually have been very advantageous that I have this overworking addiction that I have over here. But what I knew was that I needed to be able to see what was happening so that I could fix this in my business. My accountant's like, this is not a great business model, just letting you know. Like, thanks. All right. So, I knew I needed to slow everything down and mindfully see where I was not doing things or where I needed to, adjust and reprioritize instead of just doing my automatic response of burning myself out through work, because I'm throwing more time and work at it that I know how to do, but that's not actually solving the problem over here. That was the breakdown. So, lesson learned, right? And sharing it here with you today, I think this is a great example of how we can live really mindlessly in our life. I was doing if you had asked me, if you had caught me during that first year of that business, you would have heard me say, I'm so busy. I'm so busy. And like, it's a good problem to have, I guess. Like I'm working all the time. I've got all these, I've got clients. I'm building up my caseload. It's great. It's great. However, if you looked at it from my accountant's point of view, financial planner's point of view, they were like, what are you doing? Then hire somebody and do this, or, sit down and take time away from it and do it, or set aside a day a week where that's the stuff that you're doing so that the infrastructure is in place so the other stuff can be put to bed and you're making the money from all of these extra visits that you've decided to add onto your caseload. And I mindlessly just kept going at it with the one thing that I knew how to do, which was to work harder. And of course, on the surface, when I was thinking to myself, like, I'm working all the time, shouldn't this be working? And it wasn't, it wasn't computing, right? I was way in the weeds on this one, you guys. I was way in it and not seeing it for all the pieces, like the bigger picture of what was happening. I was in the hour to hour okay, I'm working and I'm expending energy. And so shouldn't I be making money, and wasn't making the money that seemed commensurate with the amount of energy I was putting into things. So it didn't make sense to me. So mindfully, I was able to take a big step back and look at the bigger picture over time, and with the help of some other people. And of course, during this time, I was also building my own meditation practice. So this is a really great example of how this is a long game tool, right? It's not something that helps you immediately, but as I've built this capacity, what I can tell you is today I catch these things way faster. I'm way more compassionate with myself, and I'm way better able and equipped to see the bigger picture, move some things around, try some stuff that's different until I find the right fit in my life. In this case, we're talking about an example of business, but the underpinnings of what I'm teaching you here with this mindfulness perspective, like taking that whole perspective, taking a step back and having an observer of yourself kind of look, but be unattached, non-judgmental towards everything that you're seeing. That's what being mindful is. Being mindless is being in it, so close to it that you're just participating in it and don't see the difference. So here's an analogy that I want you to think about. Mindfulness, or having the ability to take perspective that way and kind of slow everything down and look at it as its whole and its parts so that you can address it differently, is often like being the one that is looking in a mirror. Mindlessness is truly believing that you are the reflection, instead of the reflection being what it is, which is a reflection of the person doing the looking, right? So the mindfulness practices are about getting you into that observer self. You are the one looking into the mirror. You're in control of the conscious awareness that sees the reflection. You are not the reflection. It really is just data being projected back at you that you see in the mirror. The mirror itself is not where you are. Even though you look like you're there, you're not there, right? That is a mirage, a reflection of the person that is doing the observing. But when we get caught up in the stress of our life, like I was caught up at that time in my business, we really can get lost in believing we're the reflection, believing that that's where all, like I see her working, she's working. And so the workingness is telling you the work is being done. Like how much effort I'm putting out shows you I'm doing it. So why am I not seeing it in my pocketbook, right? And this was kind of the dilemma that I was in, was I was getting stuck in being in the reflection instead of being the one that's doing the reflecting. Now, meditation is one practice by which you can build your mindfulness capacity, your ability to go from being mindless and just being in it and not knowing where did I just set my key. I was just like doing things and I set it down and now I have no idea. Mindfulness is I could take a step back, kind of look at myself and where I was, retrace my steps and figure out where I set that key. And being mindful in the moment means that you're always able to step into that observer self perspective. So instead of being in the mess and believing you're the reflection, you are the person standing in front of a mirror that is showing you a reflection of your life. And that means that you have control to take things on in a different way. Now, how does this tie back to what I was talking about at the beginning of the podcast? How does this help women in midlife, 40 plus, who have been running for some time and are probably really ingrained in their lives in a way that has them believing they are the reflection, right? They're in that reflection. They're in the mirror. They're doing the things, but not taking that bigger mindful presence in their life. Well, I think that one of the ways that this is such a powerful tool for women in particular is that we're under taught to take on the bigger picture in general. Many of the culturation that we've had growing up was geared at us being caretakers of others or other things, or a combination. Honestly, a combination almost always in our lives. So the kinds of careers that are female dominated, the kinds of, roles that women take in our culture, oftentimes we're responsible for others, we're responsible for other things, and making sure that that's, going smoothly. But our orientation got out here, right? So we early on are taught and programmed to believe we're the reflection and not the one who's looking towards that reflection, right? And that is all kinds of messing us up by the time we hit 40 and beyond, right? That is all kinds of messing us up when we hit our stride and we're like, oh my gosh, I mean, all I'm doing is saying yes to more things because I've been told that's where my worthiness comes. I'm hustling for my worth by being a good insert here, employee, being a good volunteer, being a good parent, being a good spouse, being a good friend, being insert here, right? So we've oriented ourselves as if we're in the reflection, and that's our compass. And we've gotten really good at that mindless, like, fever pitch of just doing, too many things. So sometimes when I'm talking about the principle that I talked about a couple weeks ago, I think, that do the next right thing principle of what's right in front of us, women who are still really steeped in the mindlessness of life, and not being able to take on that arm's length and step back and see the bigger picture, or not doing that on any regular basis in a mindful way, they struggle with that principle because they think they're doing it already. And to some extent they are, and they're not, right? Like they have kind of their legs in two different places. They have their legs in the, one foot's in the present moment, kind of doing the next right thing that's right in front of them. That's part of this popcorn. And I have this, and I have this, and I have this, and I have this that I have to get to do. They're there. And the other leg is in this, what I call a thought island, where they go to worry, ruminatively worry, just over and over and over about how to plan for the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And how am I going to balance that with all the other places? Well, with their feet in both those places, they are nowhere near the present moment. They are nowhere near being in their life. They are working on their life. And I know that sounds funny because I just talked about taking this arm lengths back, right? And so if you're an arm lengths away and you can observe your life mindfully, are you not in your life? You were just saying you're looking at the reflection. Here's the thing, ladies. You have always been the observer of the reflection of your life. By the time life is being lived, it's already past tense. Like nanoseconds of past tense, right? But by the time you've experienced data, processed it and perceived it and thought, oh, this is what this is, and then reflected on what you just lived through a second ago, it's still a second ago. Okay. I know I'm getting a little woo-woo on us today. It's okay. It's okay to roll with punches. Even Dr. Natalie can get into some of the ethereals, but the present, the being in the being that does the thinking, that does the doing, that does the perceiving, that's really the kind of mindful present momentness that I want you to orient to. And the beauty of this is a place of absolute peace and infinite potential. I know that seems like, can that really happen in the midst of all the million irons that you have in the fire? But I promise you, it really can. And that, my friends, I think is part of the magic of what happened for me this summer. So I've been sharing over the last few episodes, like as I've checked in after the summer, our beginning of the summer, such a blessing, such a beautiful time away. We were on the road for 4.5 weeks. Got to work away from home, but got to experience a bunch of things. It was beautiful. And then we kind of came back to what, I've defined as an unholy mess of all sorts of people in our life got sick. there was that piece that we were dealing with. Our childcare stuff was upside down. Some things with my business were still all wonky in my, day-to-day scheduling and such. So it didn't come back to smooth sailing. It came back to needing me to be, really focused on and what's coming next and keeping things in order. Not to mention I went for 3 full-on weeks of working with no day off, right? Like I had moments off, half afternoons off, things like that. Certainly stayed up with my self-care during that time, and had about 3 weeks where, because I had these 2 weekends I worked in a row, I had 3 weeks where I worked in a row. It's just how the cookie crumbled, my ladies. So how is it possible that you can find peace in the middle of that, right? How is it possible that you can stay in a peaceful space that has infinite potential when you're feeling just barraged by all of the things that you're having to do? Well, mindfulness is really how I'm able to do that. I'm able to connect in the present moment back to this observer looking at the reflection, and she's at peace, and she has access to every resource I've ever, all of my wisdom, anything I've ever created as ways to cope with the world. And even better, and this is why I love her the most, my observer self, she's the most scrappy woman I know. And she has never met a challenge that she is not going to jump in and face. She's met challenges she didn't want to face. She's met things that she's been really trying to avoid for a hot minute. But my observer self, who I am at my core, when I take that step back, look at the bigger picture of my entire life and decide, what would work best for me here? Like, I want her on my team, no matter how many chips I'm down, like how bad it looks, because I trust her beyond anything. She's gotten me through some sticky stuff in my life, which I've shared on here, which I'm sharing today. Like, it was hard to go from that group practice into my private practice. And it was during a really crazy time in my life, which I've also shared on previous podcasts, which is part of why I was numbing, right? It wasn't just numbing from I needed to do administrative work. I was numbing from many things in my overwork during that time. And my mindful self, that observer self of looking at the bigger picture, was the sanctuary in the midst of all that, right? So now I'm going to give you another analogy, because I think that this is a really powerful one. We are like oceans in this capacity, right? Oceans. They are so deep. They run so deep. There's so many layers. There's so much stuff that's happening inside an ocean. But if all we look at is what's happening at the surface as that ocean is interfacing with the atmosphere, interfacing with whatever's floating on it, the weather, the boats, all of that nature as it's lapping up against rocks, then what we see is waves. What we see is, a lot of energy happening, right? There are times where oceans are peaceful, beautiful sunsets on peaceful, very, almost just ripples of the ocean. But still always movement. There's always something happening, right? That's where we live our life, is at that surface level. But when we need a minute, we also can connect internally. We can go down into those depths where it is still and quiet. And we can look at the surface from that angle and know there's a lot happening up there at the top. And I'm still here with this wealth of resource inside of me that can figure out how to go about this, how to do the next right thing in my life. That is such a powerful tool, my friends. And that is really what helps you have a million irons in the fire, but stay calm and clear about what your objectives are, and reassess, like stop in the midst of stuff, take some time to look at what's happening and say, during that 3-week time, I could have tried to, and believe me, I've got the office supplies to match this. I could have tried to sit down and look at my schedule and color code out all of the times, pockets of time I could do self-care and, make sure I coordinated what kinds of self-care I had. But that would have been me on a thought island, right? Not here in the present moment, not listening to the wisdom of what that observer self had. It would have been a version of me ahead of time trying to over anticipate anything that could have come my way. I'd have undermined the value of my observer self to really have her wisdom know what's best for me at any given moment, given whatever's happening on the surface of that ocean, right? It's a really powerful thing to think about. We are not the reflection in the mirror. We are the ones that are observing that reflection. And we are not only what's happening at the surface of our life. We are still waters that run deep underneath. My observer self is one of my ride or dies. I don't go anywhere without her. And now that I've really learned over time how to hone her in, which is going to be this next little bit of our podcast today, I know that accessing that is like an invaluable, almost unlimited resource at any given time in my life. So that 3 weeks came in, and I just rolled with the punches. Like I went into the working, and when I felt like I was getting intensely agitated, I took a morning and moved things around so that I had a pocket of time to just meditate and do my exercises and wake up a little bit later, sip my coffee with a little bit more time instead of just rushing through it to get to the next thing. All of that was really important to me. But I wouldn't have been able to plan that out ahead of time. There was no version of me earlier that would have known in that moment that's what I needed. And so that's what you're going with in those moments. I've decided to make a big change in my Learn to Love Your Story business. I'm going to start doing individual coaching. People wanted more of an individualized touch, and I get why. So here's the thing. Go to the notes and click on the link to get your free one-on-one coaching session with me. Yeah, that's right. Free. And here's how I do this. I have an assessment that I've put together that really helps us to evaluate your midlife and get you back on course to have that centered life where you feel like you're thriving and really loving life as it is right now, not waiting for some epic thing to happen later in your future, but really loving your life that you're in. So I start with that valuation, and we sit down together and have a conversation about it. And I'll set you on the course for where you want to focus your effort. So be sure that you sign up for your free one-on-one individual coaching session. I'm really excited to be adding this to the whole repertoire of what I do here at Learn to Love Your Story. And I'm really excited to get to know you just a little bit better. So now we come to meditation. So how does meditation interface with this? I alluded earlier, meditation is a practice that helps to build this observer mindful self, right? And meditation is just taking your focus and placing it on one thing at a time in, a finite amount of time. So it could be a couple minutes, could be up to 15, 20, 30 minutes, if that's what you want to do. If you've never done meditation before, there are beautiful 1, 2, 3 minute meditations online that you can find. Go to my website. I have a few that are a little bit longer than that if you want to try something that's a little bit longer. But on my free downloads, I've got 4 meditations for you, guided meditations that might be useful in helping kind of embark into this idea of using meditation as the practice. But you're focusing on one thing. And we're going to do a little bit of the hand model is what we call this by Dr. Dan Siegel. And I'll put a link in the notes for this podcast. So you can also go and watch his video specifically, because I'll probably butcher how beautifully he's put this together, but he's been teaching about this idea of self-awareness and mindfulness practice for decades, longer than I have, much longer than I have. So the hand model is this. If you make a fist with your thumb in the middle, right? That front area where those 4 fingers, the knuckles are, right? That's your frontal lobe, right behind your forehead here, right? And when we are using mindfulness practices or meditation practices, what we're trying to build is the capacity of the orbital prefrontal cortex. So this is a space, if I peeled open those 4 fingers, I see that thumb now curled up in the middle of my palm. That's our limbic system. That's where the emotional center of the brain is. And I'll just say it that way. It's very generic, broad way to describe that center part of our brain, but it's kind of the emotional center of our brain. And right here on the back side of that frontal lobe, which is where our higher reasoning is, things like thinking and problem solving and taking perspective, all this mindfulness practice, that's where that resides, in that frontal cortex. But there's a place on the back side of that where it connects to the limbic system, right? These two kind of have neural pathways that go between them. And the importance of building up the strength in that area is that when we're overwhelmed with all the irons in the fire that we have, we can get astray pretty quickly. And that overwhelm kind of sets off a whole cascade of hormonal changes, neurotransmitters that are flowing through our body. And literally in our nervous system and blood, adrenaline and cortisol is racing through us to help us gear up for fight or flight, freeze or fawn. It's a different episode. I can certainly link to another episode if you need me to. But what it essentially is doing is going into survival mode, right? When we have too many stressors and not enough resources, the stressors are higher than the resource level, that's a problem. And we go into survival mode. And that's that fight, flight feeling, that anxious feeling. And anxiety is not going to let us be mindful. Anxiety is just going to have us spinning wheels in the moment to just deal with surviving in the moment. But it's not in that observer self. It's all on the surface. It's only dealing with the surface issue. It doesn't get into those deep waters of calm where you have access to all sorts of wisdom and other ways of handling things. So what we need to do is bring that frontal lobe online in times where we're feeling that overwhelm, but it's hard to do, right? Because the signals from the limbic system kind of override that. They're big feelings in our body. And so it's telling that frontal lobe, like, you know what? We're not problem solving through running away from the bear right now. We're just running from the bear. And the bear is all of these things that you have going on in your life, all of that surface stuff, getting to that critical level where the stress is outweighing what you think you have for resource in that moment. So having a meditation practice literally is like weightlifting in the brain. You're building neuronal connections. You're building a bridge between that limbic system and that frontal lobe. Each and every time you focus on one thing, one of the basic meditation practices is just focusing on breath. So just noticing breath as it comes in and out of your body, not altering it, not changing it, just trying to focus on breath. And as you're doing that, and you've never done anything like this before, here's what your brain's going to do. I don't know. I thought out hamburger tonight, but I really prefer chicken. Like your brain is going to wander, right? Like it's oriented to do that, especially when it's in that overwhelmed state. It's trying to plan as one of its like worrying ways of thinking it's going to problem solve its way out of your stressful state. And so it kind of goes off onto these thought islands. Well, we want to bring it back to the breath. And each time you turn your mind back to your breath, it's like that repetition, which I did talk about, I believe, in my last episode. It's like lifting a weight up and then bringing it down, lifting a weight up and then bringing it down. So your mind wanders, you catch it, you bring it back. Your mind wanders, you catch it, you bring it back. Each and every time we do that, we're starting to strengthen those connections. And that strength training in our brain builds a really nice highway between frontal lobe and limbic system, which means when I get overwhelmed, I also can still access this observer mindful self who has still waters that are calm and resources that run deep that I want to access in a time when I'm feeling like this. So this daily meditative practice starts over time to build that capacity. And I can tell you, I used that superhighway this summer like nobody's business. Still had my moments. Go back a few episodes and I talk about this. I had a little meltdown. beginning of the summer, I had a little meltdown. It's okay. As soon as I had gone beyond that point, I was able to engage that observer self who was able in that compassionate awareness to say to me, okay, girl, like take a moment here, feel your feels, take a breath, and then let's get down to business. Let's get still. Let's get inside. Let's look at the bigger picture and let's start to decide what needs to happen here. Without that super highway, I would not have been able to do that as well. Case in point, years earlier, when I had shifted from group practice to private practice, I really was overwhelmed with how many things were happening in my life at that time. And my compensatory or coping mechanism that wasn't so good at that moment was to overwork. And it really ended up working against me because I didn't even make money from the overworking that I was doing. I made the numbing, I got the numbing down, but I did not get that money. I left a lot on the table because I had not put the infrastructure into play, but my overworking was blocking me from seeing that that was happening. Okay. So this is how mindfulness works in our lives. It creates this connection to that inner ocean that's deep, deep down, calm and still, and has access to all sorts of things. But if we stay up on the surface, we're going to get really swept up in all of the drama of those waves and how they're interfacing with the outer world. And if you're there, you're thinking you're in the reflection, that that's you, instead of remembering that you're the one observing that reflection. There's always a part of you, a source that you can come back to connect to, that helps you have a grip on how to get out of whatever circumstances or through whatever circumstances that you're in. Through is probably better terminology in that, because you don't necessarily need to get out of it. You just need to know how to handle it. And the version of you that's going to handle it for you, needs to have access to all of that information, that all the wisdom you have and how you can weave that together and problem solve your way through. So that mindful state, not mindless, not just being swept up in it, but that mindful state is really unique in allowing you to be able to do that. Now, if any of this today has sounded like something like, ooh, I could use more of this, here's what I want you to do. I'm going to link in the notes. I'm not going to talk about all the things you can find on learntoloveyourstory.com. All I want you to do is go straight to my quiz. I have a quiz on the website. And when you get your results from your quiz, it tells you in what areas of my program that you seem to be the shyest in and could use a little extra. And it will link you to places in my blogs where there's free resources, places in the videos that I've done that there are free resources. Like, I have a ton that you can do. And of course, if you want to go straight to the source of what we talked about today, you could just go on learntoloveyourstory.com and under the blog, look for self-awareness skills. I have it as a category itself, and that's where mindfulness, meditation, all of the things that we talked about today, all of that lives. So feel free to go to learntoloveyourstory.com if you want to just look for it that way. But link yourself right into that quiz, because I bet if you take that quiz, you're going to see there's a few different areas where you could use a little extra resource, and I've got them for you free of charge. So just go there and take a look at that and start somewhere. Do something, right? There's so many resources out there you can do this for free. There is nothing you need to do. There's nothing you need to purchase, but it is a practice, and it's something that I want you to commit to for yourself, for that version of you that gets caught up in those waves. I want you to commit for her to doing a daily practice like this. And you will see that if you stick with it over time, just like any kind of strength training, it really does empower you and make you a stronger version of yourself. And that's what I want for you, right? I want that for you so that you can learn to love the life that you're in right now, that story, so you can have your centered life thriving. All right. So I'm adding a little addition here. It's the legal stuff. Just so you're aware, nothing in any of these podcasts constitutes actual psychotherapy. Yes, I am a licensed clinical psychologist in the state of Minnesota, but everything here is just educational in nature and is a suggestion of things that you could be doing in your own life to learn how to love the life that you're in instead of waiting for a life that you're dreaming of to come towards you. So just remember, this is not therapy. And if ever you need any resources for mental health, look in my notes and I'll always have a little blurb at the bottom where you can click on a link and get those services for yourself.